All right. Welcome to H&D Abroad. I am Herman, half of the H&D Abroad duo. On our channel, my wife and I, Dee, share our experience to move abroad. We do that so that we can help Black couples in particular to see moving abroad as a plan A through the interaction of planning for generational wealth, through our research of a place to live that looks like it might be our forever home, and to build this community that we have on H&D Abroad. If that sounds of interest to you, we ask that you would like this video, which is always first and foremost. Stop what you're doing, like the video. And then we ask for you to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so that you'll know when we go live. We go live every Saturday at 1 p.m. Central Time, 2 p.m. Eastern, as well as various interactive lives throughout the week, like today, which is Man Monday, and Dee goes live on Thursdays for her Women's Health Spotlight. So we ask you, as always, to join us. If you're in the chat today, we ask you to let us know you're here. Give us a shout out. Let us know you're here so we can interact you, involve you, because as we always say, this is a conversation. And if you're coming later, making sure that you put in the comment section, hashtag replay, and drop in your thoughts. We always respond to our comments. Good to see you, Brown Girls Invest too. We are trying to drop it in and see if we can't move the earth a little bit today. So we're gonna jump right in. I'm gonna bring in our guests. I'll make sure I do it right. Big man Kevin.
Hey,
what's going on, Kevin? Good to see you.
Good to see you, brother.
And Kevin has been. I had the opportunity to first see Kevin on Krishan Wright's Blacks at Global. He did an interview with Krishan, and I was really impressed with his story and his experience and what he was challenging himself with in his personal move abroad experience. And so he and I have chatted a few times and really wanted to delve into what the conversation is today. Big Said is here from Agent Grateful. Good to see you, Said. Miss Tanya Brooks, always good to see you. It's always good to have you guys here with us. Good to see you. All right. So I'm going to start off with Kevin. Take a minute and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about whatever you want to drop in on the knowledge side about what your channel is about and what you're sharing and how you got into this maybe content creator space before we jump into our conversation today.
Okay, cool. Well, first I want to thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure being on UND's channel. As Herman has already said, I'm Kevin Giles. My channel is Melanin Man Travels, and we are all about educating, assisting, coaching single Black men as well as queer Black men on living abroad and moving abroad, right? Or traveling abroad and moving abroad. So on my channel, you're going to see a lot of my experiences in the various places that I've traveled, the Caribbean, Europe, South Africa. And the goal is just for brothers of a particular age group. I am retired. To just understand and be able to see what life abroad is like, mm-hmm. and how your life can be positively impacted by moving abroad, and how much ease can be brought to your life. Financially is a big one, but stress relief and personal growth and knowledge, things of that nature. So, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what we're about.
Good. Glad to have you, my man. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
All right. So this conversation today, why are so many Black men lonely?
Mm.
The difference between what is alone and what is lonely.
Yeah.
In the description, I have included a link to a PBS Hour investigative report that came out this January on the increasing loneliness of men, particularly as we age.
Yeah.
It highlighted the fact that we, in the investment of our lives, from as early as our late 20s, early 30s, begin to lose connection and regular engagement with other men. We lose the ability, no, maybe not the ability, but we lose connection for regular community, which is, I think, important to our mental health, to our social engagement, and to our overall well-being. A place where we can hash out our thoughts and feelings, and potentially address personal issues in our lives from a different perspective, so that we can go back and deal with our regular space in a regular way. As was addressed, women clearly do that better than we do. The ladies have that far better on lock than we do.
Absolutely.
I don't think it's because of our inability to connect. I think men in general, we're in a space together, we talk, we hit it off in a minute. It's not the ability to connect, it's the challenge in remaining connected. Building a level of consistency where we become interdependent is my thought. In this process of your experience, you are solo traveling.
Yes.
And there are a whole lot of stereotypes and feelings about, men solo traveling. We'll let that hang in the air for what it is. But how? Let's start off with your opinions, and I'm because I don't want to ramble. I don't want to talk too long. But I'm part of me asking Kevin this. He's got a little bit of background in social sciences, and so we're touching on both the psychology and the social aspects of men and social engagement. So first, give us the simple breakdown of alone versus lonely.
Okay. So loneliness basically is a feeling where being alone is a state of being, right?
Okay.
So loneliness, the feelings are generally sadness, depression, and it's because as a person, but as we're talking specifically as men, we don't have the companionship or the connection that we were built to have, right? So that's loneliness for whatever the reason, but it doesn't exist. The companionship and the connection doesn't exist. So we have this feeling of loneliness. Sometimes, a lot of times, we confuse that with being alone, right? And being alone can produce loneliness, but it doesn't have to. And actually, being on this travel experience of living abroad, I've now learned to look at being alone as a positive experience. So being alone, again, it's a state of being, right? So I am not in the presence, I'm not in the company of another person.
Okay.
That could be positive and negative, right? On the negative aspect, I'm alone because of the topic of this video. As a man, as a Black man, I'm lacking community. So I'm alone. Another negative aspect can be I'm in need of assistance of some sort and I have no one to depend on. I'm alone, right? Alone can also be, or your alone time can also be negative because it's avoidant behavior. So, right. So you want to, you need to be connected, but for whatever reason, you are choosing not to, or you don't feel that you have the ability to, or you're reluctant to connecting with others, specifically in this case with other men?
So you can be alone by choice.
Yes.
They used to call them hermits, or
Yeah.
yeah, back in the day. Or you can be lonely in a crowd.
Absolutely.
The inability or the lack of desire to connect can cause aloneness or loneliness. In my previous talk, the one prior to this one, I talked about um, uh, taking a self-love journey, and,
Mm.
and I expressed, my natural. It is not my nature to want to do exploratory things alone.
Okay.
I like to share in an experience, and I'm having to learn to appreciate exploring a process, a place, a hobby, or whatever by myself without either my wife
Yeah.
or some other, to use your word, companion, someone else with whom I share the experience to experience something for myself.
Right.
And I'm finding that I'm having to really create goals for why that's important.
Mm. Okay. I,
Um, Go ahead.
I think what's interesting, because I am like you and I love sharing experiences with other people. And for many years, I wouldn't go to dinner alone. I wouldn't go
Mhm.
to the movie alone, which I still generally don't go to the movies alone because you want to share that experience. So I totally get it. But what I found on this journey, and what started this journey, which actually was a trip to Chicago over a decade ago, um, me traveling alone does not mean that I'm going to be alone or lonely during that trip.
Mhm.
Why? Because there are other people on the planet.
Mhm.
Wherever you go alone, especially if you are married or in a committed relationship, when you detach from that relationship or even a familial relationship, you detach from it and you take this solo journey. Now you have an opportunity to live this small portion of your life as a quote unquote single solo person, and then you experience other people during that journey, which
Mhm.
they're not alone, and it becomes so engaging and refreshing, and you learn so much, right?
Mhm.
So back to that Chicago trip, I remember, long story short, had a ticket out there that was going to expire. I was in grad school, had 2 kids in private school, didn't have a budget for travel. And I'm like, I'm not going to waste this ticket. Where's the cheapest place I can go? So I take a trip to Chicago, stay in a hostel, don't rent a car, don't really have a budget. And that ended up being the first and best solo travel experience that I had,
Mm.
mainly because of the people that I met. Right? I'm at dinner by myself, and there's a whole group of people at a table, and they're just ruckus and having a great time. Chicago is a bring your own booze state, so they all
Mhm.
brought wine bottles, right? And they started talking about this TV show that was on at the time that was my favorite show. And they mentioned the scene. I'm in the corner ear hustling, right? Having
Mhm.
by myself ear hustling. They tell this story, and I start cracking up laughing. And that whole table shut down, and they all turned and stared at me. And I was like, oh shoot. And they're like, you watch that show? I was like, yeah, it's my favorite show. They're like, get over here. And I grabbed my dinner, my plate, and joined this group of people who were all previous grad school students together who were at a
Okay.
reunion, right? And just end up having this amazing night that I thought my evening was going to be quiet and to myself. I was going to eat my dinner and go on back to my room. It ended up being this amazing situation.
So let's ask the challenge question. A lot
Okay.
of in that scenario, a lot of people address the introvert extrovert social engagement. Would you consider yourself primarily, because there's no totally, primarily introverted or extroverted?
I am an introverted extrovert.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean, generally, I am an introvert. I love my alone time. I'm happy spending time by myself, but I love people. I'm a people person. And when I'm in a situation where I'm engaged with people that I know and love, then I have a great time. But being the introvert, if I go to a party or an event, I'm not always going to be that person that goes in and try and fit into the mix of a conversation. Now, if it's one on one, generally in my travels, if I see someone or meet someone, I'm fine on a one on one, saying hi, meeting someone and engaging, but that's the extent of it. So generally, I'm a little more introverted until I'm comfortable in that situation, and then I'm a full-on extrovert.
So there was enough of a connection point in that group setting
Mm-hmm.
that you felt comfortable enough engaging with people, you risking a social engagement with people you didn't know. Because
Yeah.
I know a lot of times that therein lies a large part is if I engage with these people, what am I walking into?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's taken for granted that as men we have that concern as well. You know,
Absolutely.
one of the things that I was telling you we had a great conversation with Cedric and Bobby of Aging Grateful and intentional metamorphosis
Yeah.
about building community for men, and I'll link that conversation later as well in the description. Is what is the perception going to be of men who are hanging out together, who are who have a regular, in that video it talked about a guy who started a once a week hangout group. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
engagement. They go to a movie, they do a cookout, they have some level of guy time where they build, just even with people they don't know, they're building a community. And there is a constant question that looms of, what are you all up to? What's
True.
going on? What's the motive here? Um, and I think that has become I stand back because I don't want to be accused. I don't want to be questioned. And,
Yeah.
a lot of men, we are in our relationships. Let's
Mm-hmm.
clarify that. In our relationships, try to be non-conflictual.
Sure.
As anti-conflict as possible.
Right.
So anything that's going to get me questioned, I'm not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
How do we combat that? Is that a simple, we just do it until everybody gets used to it, or is there a way to approach that brings security to an environment where that setting has not always elicited trust?
Mm. That's a good one, and I'm gonna answer from two different perspectives. So we kind of chatted about this earlier. So I'm divorced. When I was married to my ex-wife, um, one of the concerns was about male friendship, and you need to have male friends, and you need to connect and get out there, blah blah blah. But then on the other hand, there was the question of, well, why were y'all together so long? Well, what did y'all talk about when you were together? Things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, no, it's man time. It's not a conversation for you to be involved in. And I think if you're in a committed relationship, that you just lovingly continue to say that.
Mm-hmm.
Because do you question your wife when she's out with her girls? Meaning, well, what did you guys talk about? Well, what did you do? Well, why did that come up? I, I can't speak for you. I don't think that you
it's almost do you dare?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
So it goes both ways,
right.
right? And now I'm a fully out gay man, and even my female friends would question the time that I would spend with my male friends.
Mhm.
Or if we're doing a guy trip, the question was, well, why can't I go? Because you're not a guy. This is guy time. And I can't speak to what the potential threat to that could be. I mean, it could possibly go way deep into slavery and Jim Crow and the separation of the family, and some genetic insecurities that have traveled with Black women about the men in their lives not being available based on their decision or not their
Mhm.
decision. Yeah, I can't speak to that. That's part of my assumption, if you will. I've never really looked into it, but yeah, but there is definitely something there that um, brings some type of insecurity in our female partners, our female loved ones, that cause them to, yeah, question what we're doing, when, why, how. Yeah.
You know, Seth is saying here, it comes
Yeah.
from a history of men who cheat. And I think that brings
Yeah.
truly a level of distrust. Conversations that I've had with some young ladies recently is the poor way. I mean, that sounds bad way to say that. Just walking in head first into a distrustful situation. Uh,
Mm.
in that situation, you then end up with a complete lack of connections. Um,
Meaning
and
with the male and female partner.
between men,
Okay. Oh,
between
right.
men.
We walk into that, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you now have a failure of men to say, I can build this space. This space is safe for me. These are people I can depend on. These are people I can grow for. And it's more than that one guy that you've been friends with forever, that he's
Yeah,
carrying the whole weight of your friendship on his back, or
absolutely.
your partner who's carrying the weight of your friendship on their back.
Yep.
Um, and I think we fail to recognize then the loneliness part. Uh,
Mm.
um, we are in an age group
Yeah.
where we are beginning to see more and more people slip away. We are losing to illnesses, to tragedies, to sudden deaths, and our circles, because of our work, the time we invest in work,
Yep.
the time we invest in family responsibilities.
Yep.
Uh, a lot of times, the responsibilities that, to be honest, we probably put on ourselves. Um, Example, yesterday, I'm out doing some work. It's Father's Day. I had to work on Father's Day.
Mm.
It's what it is. I'm out
Yeah.
working my projects and came onto a house with a young man outside, like he might have been late 20s, early 30s,
Okay.
and he's doing some work in his yard,
Hmm.
to shorten it. I carry a package to his front door. I'm met at his door by his pregnant wife and two little girls.
Okay.
And I teasingly say to the girls, "You all should be out here with your daddy, helping him work on the yard." And his wife said, "We didn't ask him to be out there.
Oh, wow.
We didn't ask him to cheat. He chose to go out there and do that." And I said to him as I passed him by, "Those little ones won't be little long."
Mm. Yeah.
They were
Yeah. Yeah.
all in. They were all, his wife and the kids. They were all in pretty dresses, and like I said,
Yeah.
she was pregnant with their first boy, and he outside creating work for himself.
Uh-huh. Avoidant
And
behavior.
And I think sometimes, yeah, not just, I think in large ways we create avoidant behavior. Like you said, we unconsciously find ways to be alone and then don't understand why we are lonely.
Yeah.
We don't understand why we don't have an outlet. I have tried to be honest about sharing the fact that I don't know if I have a hobby. D has been trying to encourage me to travel alone or to
Yeah.
travel with the guys for a while now. And
Yeah.
I really have to admit that I'm having to work that up in my head.
Sure.
A part of that is finding people that I've made connections with
Yeah.
that I think sometimes once I get to know them, I go, yeah, we're not gonna be able to connect.
My best
Yeah.
friend and I talk about that all the time. It's like, yeah, you can't travel with everybody.
Yeah. And sometimes you don't find out till you're like any relationship, you find out when you've pressed deep off into engagement with this person, and now you're trying to figure out how to say, yeah, bro, I'm not gonna be able to make it to that dinner trip. I'm not gonna be able to go with y'all on the cruise, because
Right.
I don't know if I can trust. And
that's what you just answered a question from a while back.
okay.
So, and I'm sorry. Let me say this because I wanted to thank you for your vulnerability right there, because you said that you don't even know if you have a hobby, and I want to come back to that because I'm in the same boat.
Okay.
But okay, I lost my train of thought. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I was trying to remember what I said so I can kind of spur your thought.
Right.
Need an instant replay right here.
You just said that the traveling with someone else, and the trust.
Okay.
Men have been socially conditioned to not tap in to the emotional part of our being.
Correct.
Where trust lies in there.
Correct.
It's a mix, right? So obviously there's the action piece of it, that trust can be built upon, but the trust is an emotional vulnerability that you extend to someone else, that they obviously have to earn through their actions.
Agreed.
Right? Because we haven't been socially conditioned to, again, tap into our emotional being, then a lot of times the relationships that we have with other men are very surface. Because there's two pieces. We're not taught how to do it, and we've been conditioned not to do it or not to feel, right? So growing up, you fall, you scrape your knee, boy, stop crying. That didn't hurt. Don't acknowledge, express, connect to these feelings that you have. So we walk around feelingless. And then we are expected to engage authentically with each other, speaking of relationships with men, but this has been suppressing us our whole life.
Correct.
And so you got two brothers who desperately want to connect because our social conditioning does not negate who we have been created to be. We're human, we're social beings. I don't care what trauma, what psychosis you may have experienced that prevents you from connecting. Still deep within inside, that is a desire, right? That we have as human beings. So these two brothers want to connect, but socially we've been conditioned not to, and we haven't been taught how to. So we just do the surface thing, which is how we connect via sports or hobbies or whatever. Because I can spend all day with you, and we're gonna talk about the entire NFL roster, all the teams, all the games. We can go back ad nauseum in history of the Super Bowls, or if it's basketball, or even if it's art or whatever it is, and we can never authentically connect.
One of the things that I share is I believe wholeheartedly that our physical selves as men is a part of our communication style. It is a part of how we express ourselves. Yes, ladies, I agree that learning to express ourselves verbally is something we have to learn to do, and that I think we are capable of doing. Yep. But I think as you've shared, Kevin, that there is a suppression point. If you go back and look at old, pictures drawn in the 1900s and early 1900s, there's always pictures of little boys walking down the street with their arms around each other and their fishing poles over there. They're locked. They're not just walking together. They're physically engaging each other.
Right. In lockstep. Yeah.
At what point did we make physical connections of men inappropriate? When did we lose the ability to be physically in touch with each other and it not be questioned as inappropriate? Because suppressing the physical part of our communication, I believe, also suppresses our verbal and emotional ability to express ourselves as well.
Absolutely.
And so what do we have left? Not just talking about sports, it's where we touch each other. We bang each other in basketball. We bang each other in football, in rugby. All of our sports are called contact sports. It's where we find a way to physically express ourselves together. And it's seen as the manly space. But if we spend too much time sitting too close to together on the couch, what are y'all up to? What's going on? What's wrong with y'all? And that plays into our emotional well-being. It plays into our sexuality and discovery. It plays into our relationships, gender to gender. It creates a conflict space, which further, I believe, breaks down the ability for self-expression, and then leads back again. Especially authentic, because then I don't know what I'm feeling. You're too angry. Right. You need to control your anger. Little boys scratch themselves, and you shouldn't touch yourself there. Well, it itches. Right. Everything else itches. You didn't tell me to stop scratching my arm. You didn't tell my sister to stop scratching her breast. Why?
Absolutely. And her breast and my testicles are the same. Meaning why they itch. Because of their place of the body.
Their skin, they're part of my body.
Well, and it's a place that doesn't get air.
Right.
So I mean, it is right.
Absolutely. So we have these cultural press downs that we build on, that we then turn around and teach our sons.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
One interesting thing you talked about, the whole contact sport thing. Most probably heterosexual men don't recognize the homoeroticism in sports. We see it all the time because, again, it is a way for men to have physical touch and connection in a way that society has said is wrong. So dudes on the basketball court, on the gridiron, slap each other on the butt all the time.
Correct.
There are lots of hugs, lots of embracing. Inside the locker room, there's all of this joking, homoerotic play, right? And you're shaking your head. And I'm not even an athlete, and I know that. My sons were. And I would even watch their interactions with their teammates and even the coaches. And it wasn't anything inappropriate, but it was just their way to express something that society has said, oh, make sure that you don't look like, be like, sound like this thing, right? Which really goes down to misogyny, right? Because we've also been conditioned to not truly love and appreciate women, objectify women, mistreat women, and for men to not be anything like them. So, don't cry. You look soft. You're being a sissy. All of those negative things that we put on boys and other men is really a misogynistic positioning, because we don't want you to be like a woman, because we view women less than.
Okay, but I'm going to challenge you then.
Please do.
Because on the other side of that, we then hear you need to express your feminine side. And that's probably well, you hear all the time, I need you to, you need to be, that was a big, thing in the 90s,
Absolutely.
Men need to be able to learn how to express their feminine side. I'm like, I'm not a female. I don't have a feminine side. Nobody's asking women to express their masculine side. And why can't my natural emotional self in all of its beauty and glory just be my full man self and not a feminine side? It's only feminine if I can express myself,
right?
And it creates doubts, and it creates question, it creates insecurity, lack of self-confidence. There are people who are afraid to explore their future selves because they don't want it to be, am I being identified? When I was a teenager, my dad said, date a lot of girls. And that statement terrified me because I did not understand what dating was.
Okay.
I heard dating, and that meant I have a lot of girlfriends.
Yeah.
True dating is I'm getting to know a lot of people. Dating is my name is hi. Like Eminem, hi, my name is. You're sitting at the table. If you got 5 girls and 5 guys sitting at a table, that technically is a date, even if they're not any of them interconnected. Right. It's a date.
Yeah.
We again, to my cultural, we mix dating with courting. But words like courting, are so old fashioned that we dump everything into into the mix together. And so now we're dating. Yeah, we're just hanging out.
We're just hanging out, getting to know each other, see if we like each other.
So, but that lack of understanding, because in my world, in my teenage world, dating meant this was my girl.
Right. Absolutely.
And if I'm saying I got several girls, then I'm that dude. And I don't want to be that dude.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's social constructs, right? So you just mentioned about the masculine and feminine, right? So I'm going to take a step back. So I'm assuming that you identify as a Black man, an African-American man, whatever term that you choose.
Correct.
That's a social construct. Race is a social construct that comes out of racism from white folks.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Right? So when you say, or not you specifically, but when the distinctions between masculine and feminine are made, those are also social constructs. In the sense that as men, we do have a feminine side, and as women, they do have a masculine side. And I think what you were trying to say is, why do they have to be termed that way?
Correct.
Right? So if you are nurturing to your children, and maybe even more so than your wife, then it could be said that that's your feminine side that you're in touch with, and it is part of her feminine side that she may not be in touch with. Yes, and having those,
Yeah, because parenting is more maternal than paternal, even though technically it's not.
Oh, right, absolutely. Right. And so we make the assumption that women are more nurturing because they were the one that carried the baby in their body and already had that connection where once a child is born, then we have to make a connection, a physical connection with them. Right. So the assumption is made, that women, and generally they are, right? Generally,
Mhm.
women are more nurturing, but that doesn't mean that men aren't and can't be. And then should we shy away from that side of our being or anything that feels that way?
If a little girl is a daddy's girl,
Yeah.
she can be a daddy's girl the rest of her life.
Yeah.
But if a little boy is a mama's boy, he's got a time limit on that.
Problematic beyond a certain age. Absolutely.
He's got a time limit on that.
Yeah.
And because it stipulates that his mama, he's tied to his mama's, he's not independent. He's to her apron strings, and and Homemade asks a good question here: is are men allowed to be fully human, including in their emotions?
Mm.
And I wonder if that's the culture that we live in, or if that's global. It is that it, because I think it's a Western mindset, and I think it is completely enveloping all other cultures, because I think there are still cultures where boys bond like humans, and
where adult men kiss.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. In Spain, I mean, the amount, it's like every day, all day long, you'd see men run into each other at the park and they would embrace and kiss. Where in the States, that just would not happen, and it will cause all kind of problems.
You're raising red flags.
Yeah.
Servant teacher Nikki asked, how do we correct this for the next generation? Do we as mothers do it, allow fathers to do it, or is a team effort, allowing our boys to be okay with expressing themselves wholly? Whose job is it? And I think it's both. And because I think I'm always interested to watch new parents. Neither have been parents before, but he gets told what to do.
Right.
He gets told what to do, and you can't hold the baby like that. You can't do that with the baby. You can't. And I'm going, but neither of you were parents prior to today. One is not an expert in the other. One of the things that I have to say publicly that I appreciate about my wife is that we engaged parenthood together. And if I felt strongly about something, she respected that guidance. Now, I mean, as a new parent, I admit to having made some mistakes. We should have done this or that. There were some times when we, because it is a collective process. It is a conversation that most people don't take time, Nikki, I think, to think about, is how we're going to allow our boys to flourish as more than just males, or more than just masculine, or more than just, where are we? My son put on my wife's heels one day, and I was like, boy, if you don't get out of them heels. I admit to that. Sure. Get out of those, get out of them shoes. But why? What was I afraid of?
Right. That was my question. Yeah.
Okay. There are things that I know as they've become adults that I have released myself from to release them from, that I was adamant, no, never, no way in hell about when they were kids.
Sure.
I didn't care if they picked up dolls. I didn't care if she picked up trucks, but there were certain movements. And I was like, we're going to cut that out.
Right.
Because I had certain cultural, religious, societal beliefs that said, if it's not in here, you've lost your mind. Yeah. And to be able to say, okay, I need to step back. Who is this person developing to be? And there are things that I have to admit that I've gone back to them and said, back there, I said such and such. I apologize for that. Forget that. I made a stance. I made a declaration when you were younger about certain things, forget that. What do you want?
Yeah.
If that makes you happy, if that's what your life is, if that's who you are, because I recognize in my 50-year-old self that I'm still trying to
Mm-hmm.
stretch my, break down the bonds of, and I don't think verbally there were stipulations and constructs put on me, but I think in the environment in which I lived, I understood this far, no further. This is
Absolutely.
okay, this isn't. And so moving back into the space of men connecting with each other, then a lot of I believe, lack of inner, the lack of ability to connect with one another has to do with that we don't know who we are individually.
Which, when you did this, right, the box, and we can't be outside of that, well, just because your son wanted to try on heels, and I would have done the exact same thing, knowing what my sexuality was when I was raising kids, but still, I would have had the same response, because we don't want to come outside of that, right? But your son is just exploring, right? And maybe the conversation could have been, "Oh, son, those are mommy's heels, right? You see mommy wear those. Those are shoes that are just typically designed for women." Oh, right. And maybe he would have worn that day and that would have been the end of it. Or maybe he would have stepped out because he didn't feel comfortable anymore, or whatever the situation was, right? But because we as adult men are afraid to explore, or are reluctant to explore based on our conditioning, then it goes back to the loneliness, being alone. And when we talked about traveling alone, because we've been conditioned to not explore. And there's a fear of that.
What I find interesting is men are often accused of failing to have the ability to recognize boundaries, but I also think that we often also don't know how to set boundaries for others towards us.
Let's talk about that. That's good.
when we were younger in our dating, especially into our marriage, she was like, my wife asked me if I was homophobic, and I was like, no, I'm not homophobic, but I come from a place where I find, to use the terms, flagrantly homosexual men in the big city I was from were often very aggressive. And I was like, I don't want to be approached outside of I don't want to be pushed up on even by a woman. That's not of interest to me. I don't want my person to be invaded. And we don't know until it's something that we're uncomfortable with, and then we don't know how to express it. And we express it in phobic way, we express it in anger, we express and lash out because we don't know how to say, I appreciate you, but no thank you.
Right.
We've been taught, when you don't like it, fight it.
Right.
You're playing an aggressive sport. You didn't like how the dude hit you, you jump up and you punch him. Even though he hit you legally, you just didn't like it. And so there's a negative reaction to, I don't understand this. I don't know. And we see it in society everywhere. I think some of our laws are trending towards, I don't understand that, so I'm acting aggressively towards it.
Absolutely.
And as Black men in particular, we catch the brunt of that. And then we turn around and we dole that back out on, as Nikki says, the generations behind us. How do we put a grasp on that? How do we say, okay, let me control this? Is that something that mothers set in place? Is that something that fathers set in place? And if it's a joint thing, where's the connection point in that process?
Yeah, and that becomes difficult because even if you and your spouse have a similar parenting philosophy, or you've had, which most of the times, a married couple hasn't sat down and said, hey, we're going to, raise the kids this way. And if you did, there's still things that are going to come up that it's like, oh, I didn't think about that.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a position and she has a position. And then you got to figure out, okay, how's that going to work? So like in my marriage, my wife was of the position at the time, for the most part, do as I say,
mm-hmm.
right? And I was more the position of let them speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe her position was from a point of protection and making sure that they didn't go too far out of the bounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
mm-hmm.
we're not always going to be in their presence. And mine was coming from, I want them to learn how to speak up for themselves, how to communicate, how to handle their feelings. So were either of them wrong? No.
Correct.
But the approaches were totally different,
right,
in how they were practiced, which then could sometimes bring conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were in our, mid to late 20s when we got married, and we didn't have the wherewithal to sit down and have a conversation to understand why my position in parenting was this way and why yours is this way, and how do we bring it together.
And sometimes you don't know until you're in the midst of parenting.
Exactly. Or after, or grandparenting.
Yeah.
That long to figure it out.
Yeah, there are a whole lot of grandparents fixing their parenting styles.
Yeah. So for me to answer servant teacher Nikki's question, it absolutely is both, and understanding what each parent's strengths are to contribute to that process.
Okay.
And obviously you have to work, as a collaborative team, and bend, right? Because if you don't always understand or agree with what your wife's position is on something, it doesn't always have to be a hard no for you. It's like, okay, how can I find some common ground? Okay, I'm gonna give a little here, then she can give a little here, and then, we make it work.
Our youngest son is the last of his teen years. He was expressing to me a conversation that he had with one of his boys, right? Okay. With his boy, because he has a limited amount of friends. He was having a concept. His friend was telling him that he was basing some of his decisions about his social involvement, dating, friendships, on a time period that's so far behind him that he's like, that's irrelevant. You were too young that's not where you are in your development right now. You need to build whatever. And he said to me that he said to his friend, but where am I supposed to learn to do that? My father don't have no friends.
Wow. Okay.
and he wasn't being critical.
Absolutely.
He wasn't being in the scope of his life.
Mm-hmm.
We were either at the time trying to build friendships or fellowship through, the church.
Yep.
And that engagement, sometimes that went well, sometimes it didn't. When it didn't, it faded away. And in the midst of their teenage years, everybody's working, everybody's going. We come home, we trying to survive. There was no, I went out to hang out. There was no, I went to the bowling alley. I went to okay. And I realized that I have created a replica already that he's on track on. In that report that I linked about the loneliness, it did not start off by identifying loneliness in men who were 50, 60 plus. It
Yeah.
said in men between the ages of, it was somewhere in the middle 20s to 30, that they were less than 15% who stated they had friends, a regular community of friends. We're talking about guys who just finished college, guys who are still dating, they're in the early part of their marriage, and already they have no friendships.
Right.
It's
And
been
unfortunately for them, they get it coming from two angles. So they get the same stuff that you and I got, right? But then they also have technology is the problem. So social media, the internet, all those things that keep them from connecting, right?
because it mentioned that, right?
Yeah, it was like, go outside. Go outside. Your parents were sick of you being in the house. Go outside. So you had to go outside. You had to make friends. You had to connect, right? Where, unfortunately, these kids aren't doing that.
They're engaging from a distance. And so standing in place in person, trying to hold a conversation becomes awkward, or, riddled with anxiety, and I wonder if in part, I think also in our generation of parenting, we became really cautious about who came to our house, and whose house we let our kids stay at. The 80s were riddled with the stories of kids who were abused and molested by the neighbors and went over to the friend's house, and so we became that era of, you don't spend the night, you don't whatever. And I think we also dumbed down their social lives, both in how we engaged and how we allowed them to engage. And those are things that I've really been trying to put a grasp on. So here we are as men, trying to move past this low community engagement. On this community here with us today, we got Cedric in the conversation. We got David in the conversation. We got a couple of husbands looking over shoulders. I think that's something we were talking about coming back to. But a large part of this conversation, where the guys, where are the gentlemen in this conversation, and wanting, and once we've made this connection, how do we sustain it? If you and I and Cedric and I and David and I, if we never end up in the same place, if we never end up living together, how do we create an interaction? Is there a way to create a community that is not local? And locally, how do we create a communication? To be very fair, the Exodus Summit ladies are doing that doggone thing.
They're doing it. Yeah.
Okay. D was just on in a whole conference. They are. What are we failing to do? Where is the disconnect? Because again, we're not talking about our ability. You can sit down next to each other in the mall and strike up a conversation and sit there for hours, and we never met each other before. Give each other our phone numbers and never call each other.
Right. And and I think it's about the willingness or the capability of being vulnerable, being authentic, right? So just those two, vulnerability and authenticity, is about trust.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I'm sitting next to this cat who's waiting on his wife to shop while I'm waiting on mine, I don't know him. So how vulnerable am I going to be? How authentic am I going to be? And if we had this interesting conversation on whatever topic, and it's like, oh, now we got to leave, but I really would like to follow up and finish our conversation, because I don't trust you, I ain't calling you. I'm gonna just let that conversation go. But if there was some connection, some vulnerability, like if because as men, it's difficult for us to communicate certain things. So let's just say I'm sitting there and the gentleman's wife happened to mention something to him about his ill parent. his father has cancer or something, right?
Okay.
I lost both my parents to cancer. So
Mm.
I could have a conversation about that and encourage him, maybe give him some resources, whatever. And because we made that connection, now this man trusts me because I come from a place that he's at. Now he feels that he can be vulnerable. Now he feels that he can be
Mm.
authentic. And so the conversation that we were interested in continuing may have been about the Super Bowl, but the connection that we made will make us stay connected, where then we probably will call, right? Versus something just being surface. It's like,
Correct.
whatever. I ain't got to connect, right? But again, we've been socialized and haven't been taught how to have those connections or to be comfortable enough maybe within ourselves to reach out to another brother that way. Then we just don't do it. Where I would think the women, we talk about Exodus Summit and we all know them, they and women do naturally have that ability, right? Thinking on both sides of their brain where we think
Mm-hmm.
one side. So there is some physical things in
Right.
women that help them do that. Well, you and I have to learn to do it.
Okay.
But what you asked, what's keeping us from doing it? The trust, the vulnerability, the authenticity, right? Are challenges for us.
We we looking at Cedric's comment here.
Yeah, I'm just reading it and I agree.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the balance here is we are not blaming wives for our lack of friendships. I think what we're talking about here is how we as men prioritize. Rob of Intentional Metamorphosis says all the time, as men, we can focus on one thing at a time. And that one thing is our goal. And if our goal is maintaining our house, then I see you fellas when I see you. You know, if I happen to go play ball, when we bump into each other, you know, and then balancing for those of us who take the time to explore personal time, going out to play ball with the guys or going to a movie, balancing between that and home time. Now, for those who are challenged by every time they're out, you've got another something to work through. And for the sake of plugging here, I need to say that I think counseling is important. When you got to a point where trust is an issue in your house,
absolutely.
When there is a miscommunication between two people, between the needs of each person, sometimes counseling is an important factor in helping move a conversation in a positive direction.
Absolutely.
I think that's a necessary plug. But I also think that as men, we need to say, I need this time. This is my time. And you know, somebody asked me, a couple people recently asked me, oh, you don't want a man cave? I was like, but I need a man cave. I'm not hiding from my wife. I don't, we watching TV, we're watching TV. If she's watching something I don't want to watch, then I find something else to do. I don't need to be in another space to do that. If you need to claim personal time, how do you do that in a way that does not isolate you from your family? At the same time, if personal time is being asked for, are you as the partner providing the respect to your partner to allow them the space to grow and learn about themselves?
Absolutely. Because I think the space that men take, and I think a man cave is a place that can also happen, and that can be a reason why you have a man cave and not just to be running. But yes, a lot of times it is avoiding behavior. But men spending time alone and or with other men to learn about themselves is taking care of the family. Right? So because men, we are fixers. So taking care of the family a lot of times to us is make sure that I get to work on time, and I keep this money coming in. And when the roof is leaking, I make sure that get fixed. And all these things that I can do makes me a man that's taking care of my family. But then I skip the part of how do I be? Because if I don't know how to be, then I'm I don't want to say I'm no good to my family, but there's a part that I'm a detriment.
I'm just doing. Yeah.
And so your example with your son, right? In learning how to be and learning how to have more vulnerable, authentic friendships, then you would have just naturally modeled that to him. And then, and I'm not being critical because you and I are in the same boat.
Right.
And even today, I'm 58 and I got one best friend and in LA and two other friends.
Yep.
In Guadalajara, I have zero black male friends. Because
I get
it. That I know are either doing their own thing or they're in and out. Right. And I have a few in different cities around the States. So I too, even though I'm an advocate of connecting with men and building these relationships, it's difficult because, again, I've done the work on myself and I know how to be vulnerable and open and know how to test for trust. Again, my male counterparts all haven't had that experience. So it's difficult again to make those friendships. And when I say friendships, I would believe that you agree. I ain't talking about acquaintances because I got a bunch of acquaintances. Right? You go shit and then that's that. But can I call you and be like, okay, I'm struggling with this situation, or let me run this by you. I need support in this area. Can you hold me accountable here? Yeah, it is very, very few men and black men specifically that I have.
I would dare say, Kevin, that we even have people with whom we who we hold in high regard, but we don't keep enough connection to them to roll it into a regular level of engagement. There's people right off the top of my head I can think of where I go, man, that's my boy. But I still may not think about them if I want to build support. Cedric says two things here that I wanted to, you talked about doing and being. I think a lot of times this is very important to understand. We find something to do because we don't know what to be.
Absolutely. That's a brilliant statement.
You come home at the end of the day. You come home at the end of the day and you're in the garage crafting because I don't want to come in here and try to be. I don't want to, there's a hiding place. And this statement he shared here.
Relevancy.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm gonna do something if I can't be. Absolutely.
It goes back to us tying our work to our personality, to our identity. Who are you? I'm a fireman. No, I didn't ask you what you do. No, I'm a fireman. That is who I am.
Right. And that's a Western concept. Absolutely.
And this statement that he says here, spending time and not feeling guilty. Why are we feeling guilty?
Right. That's what I want to explore because I think that's amazing that he's finding friends there. And I hear about San Miguel because I'm in Guadalajara, that the community there, the black community is really thriving. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, where's the guilt coming from?
It's this statement from Nikki.
Okay.
There has to be some almost at this point some generational counseling, because even things we do not verbally pass down, we are genetically passing down.
Yes.
That is the trauma of our enslavement, of our history in this country.
Yeah.
And I would dare say, in a lot of times around the world.
and our conditioning to do, because after enslavement, Jim Crow, civil rights era, men have been conditioned to work, do. And so we don't know anything outside of that. And then that does get passed down genetically. Absolutely.
Homemade. Go ahead. Finish it.
Can you go back to Nikki's comment?
Yeah.
And see, and what I love about this, because I agree with this, but we are talking about Black folks.
Right.
Black folks have been socially conditioned to not go to counseling.
Correct.
To not believe in counseling.
Correct.
And then coming from a Christian perspective, there are many Christians who don't believe in counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a minister in a church that our counseling ministry was throughout the community. And one of the top pastors on staff was adamantly against psychotherapy, counseling, psychology. He thought it was crazy. Right. And so we got all these conflicts that prevent, for lack of better words, of us getting this help that we need.
I think this question from Homemade will really round us out for today. Do you think Black men will take PTO or a career break to start a healing process?
That's a whole other video.
That response right there. And I agree with you. And it is a conversation I want us to have again. But to spark it a little bit, you're talking about. I know I felt the anxiety in the room rise just from that conversation, because you're saying do we as men feel like we have the place to say, I need time off. I need a break. I need to stop. We're talking about in an era, Kevin, where we have equal employment homes the majority of the time. At the very least, two people are working, two people are providing. If you have a two family home, you got people who are providing, because I'm assuming that context would be based in most often in a but even in a single home, it is, if you're on your own, do you feel okay saying at 35, 45, 50, you know what, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to hit the road. And there's a young man that we watch, Isaiah Ashley. Isaiah was 27 when he stopped whatever business he had, sold his business, hopped on a plane, flew to Thailand and began a whole life in Thailand.
Wow.
If he were 45 and still single, somebody would say, where's he making his money?
Right.
What's he doing? Right. What's his motives? There's a, and we have also adopted all the anxieties of, can I live? Can I do? Will I have enough if I am not A, B, C, D? Will I be questioned? How will I be perceived? There's all of those. Sometimes the people who love us don't even have those stipulations around us, and we've adopted them. We wear them, I think, sometimes like a burden, like a badge. I must persevere until I pass out, and it proves that I said several months ago, I really don't want death to be my legacy.
Sure.
Working myself to death, exhausting myself to death. That's not nobody's happy because you left here like that.
Right. And there are folks who walk around with a badge. It's like, I've been on my job 32 years and I've never taken a sick day. What? That's problematic. One, your sick days are part of your compensation, so you need to take all of them. That was part of you agreeing to work there, right? They're going to pay you X dollars an hour or a year. Your vacation and sick time was a part of that, but that's a whole nother conversation. Men taking a career break, it's really layered, and at some point I'm going to get into detail on my journey on my channel about how I got from there to here. But a lot of times, if you are a man who is married with a family, there's two things. One, if you stop working and your wife is still working, that might be problematic. With her family, with your extended family, it's like, well, why is this lazy Negro not working?
With the neighbors,
all of that, right?
Yeah.
And then within you as a man,
mm-hmm.
Okay, I need to be the quote unquote breadwinner. I need to be bringing in money. I can't not work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you said earlier, we have been conditioned to make our identity what we do as a living. So if I took a career break, who am I? So you got all of these external and internal challenges that will prevent us from doing that some kind of way the ladies have figured out, I'm doing this anyway.
Yeah. Productivity is the undoing of well-being.
Okay,
that is
with that one.
I mean, you know, because I have to, and then you're sick, and then Absolutely. There's nothing. And supportive wives will not make you feel weak for taking a career break. I'm gonna roll back into a statement from David that I think we can round out here with.
I'm with it, David.
I commit to not putting this off on somebody else.
Okay.
I commit to exploring and trying to implement the process myself. We can stand around and continue to wait for someone else to do it. And if someone else does it before I do, or wants to join in me with it, I'm for it. But I commit to not waiting for someone else to do it. I'm using as my example, several years ago, we explored a men's ministries, a potential men's ministries at the church that we were attending. In that meeting, we had, just a bunch of the guys. We all came together. We sat down in the basement of the church to discuss, would we want to, and what would that look like? It was supposed to be a general conversation. The gentleman who initiated that conversation, his wife and daughter had been at the church before he got there. He had been in transition from their move up north, and so they had been there several months prior to him. So when he came, he said, "Hey, I need to meet with you. He's a strong Jamaican guy." And everybody was like, "What do you need? What do you do?" And he pulled us together. At the end of that conversation, it was probably the first time I'd seen that many grown men in a room emotional, highly emotional. And we began an interaction that I think changed the environment and culture of that little church at the time. I'm initiating in honor of him. I'm initiating the same concept. Cedric and I have been in conversation about it. David and I have been in conversation about it. We've had several people and we've kind of talked about it. I'm putting my foot in the water.
I'm in.
Because I think that we can commit to making a connection. It's going to require a sacrifice and a commitment that quite honestly makes me uncomfortable. And what makes me uncomfortable about that is because I'm such a people person. I'm such an engager. We fail to recognize the hurt and trauma and vulnerability that men carry day to day in our lives. It's our job to be backs to the wind, square-shouldered, and to be able to stand with other men and say, I'm hurting, I'm lost.
Absolutely. The list goes on.
To people who you have, as you said earlier, have not invested in, have not committed to. I have to trust that you're going to protect me. I have to move past because we have a vulnerability connection. My father has cancer, and before we get there, I have to trust that you have my best interest at heart as Black men. And so I initiate that commitment today, and I solicit anyone who's interested to join me in creating that process. Sit down and write down thoughts, ideas. Spend time, if you have a partner, a spouse, and have a conversation about what that would look like for you individually. And let's commune together. You all, our Instagram page is connected here. You can always DM us in the Instagram page. I'm pretty sure Kevin is open to being connected. Said Dave, I'm putting them out there for connection. And let's create a community we can feel safe in, and that we can grow in, because I believe our mental health, our physical health, our future health, not just for ourselves, but for our sons and all our future sons, this is pertinent to our growth. And that's my commitment today.
Amazing.
This conversation, Kevin, much love and appreciation for spending time with me today, and putting this out on the table. Thank you.
It's a privilege and a calling. Absolutely.
I appreciate it. To everyone who's stood with us in this conversation today, in the comments, thank you for, as always, your support and this conversation. For those of you who will be watching this in the future, please subscribe to Kevin's show, Kevin's channel, Melanin Man Travels. Always, we ask you to subscribe to us here at H&D Abroad. We are in the community building mindset and process. As Black men, we desire to grow, to learn, to connect. And we hope to be able to make that commitment today. Thank you all for being here with H&D Abroad. We'll see you on the next Man Monday, but don't forget to check us out this coming Saturday. See you all soon.
Take care.